The title of today's talk is called Spectrum of Merits. I was having a discussion with some of the members yesterday after they cleaned up my office. I think Brother Chan and two other members. He was talking about his course on Buddhism, which they offer once a year for 3 months. And they were saying that they would usually start campaigning or advertising for that course on Vesak Day, because there will be many people coming on Vesak Day. And these are what we call Vesak Day Buddhists. They are Buddhists on Vesak Day, most of them, but they don't know very much about Buddhism. So it's really a good strategy to advertise for any programs or whatever activities that you're going to hold after Vesak, during Vesak itself. Vesak Day is significant because it's supposed to be the Buddha's birthday as a human being, in his last birth, his enlightenment, as well as his final passing away. Because of that occasion, people flock to the temple to celebrate as well as to do dana. As you all know, when it comes to doing dana, many Malaysians have an inherent faith and generosity in them. When they hear of a monk or members of the Sangha coming to visit a temple or association, many people will flock to do dana. When you try to advertise for a Dharma talk, there will be less people coming. And then when you say there's going to be a meditation class, even lesser people. Right? Not? There seems to be a very common phenomena in Asia. This is kind of different in the West. In the West, particularly in America, UK, and down under, which is not really the West, but a lot of Westerners are staying there. Many Buddhist temples of all traditions are usually supported by Asians. Asians will do the cooking, will give material support to the monks or monastics living in those premises. But the Caucasians would come for free meditation. They are more interested in meditation, in a spiritual practice, and not so inclined to give generously to support the monks. Many monastics living in these Western temples and Buddhist associations have to appeal to Asians to get enough funds for development and maintenance of a temple or their association premises. Some of them come all the way to Malaysia to do a Dharma tour and advertise that they're having some building projects in their monastery or temple or association or meditation center. And we Malaysians are more than happy to support them, even though we don't enjoy the premises. We don't enjoy the facilities that we help to support. But it's inherent in Asians, perhaps, this spirit of giving. And because of this inherent tendency in Malaysians and Singaporeans to give so much to monastics, this has been taken advantage of by people who are not virtuous in character. We call them bogus monks. They go to the pasar malam or to the hawker stalls, sometimes with a mini bowl, sometimes with just their bag, and exchanging amulets or so-called blessed things for money. Now these may not really be bogus monks. Some of them may be real monks. They were ordained somewhere, maybe in our neighboring countries, and because they are poor, they come to Malaysia and capitalize on the generosity of our people. So they are actually making a fortune here. I will come back to that later. The purpose of my talk today is to try to encourage more people to go beyond just dana. Dana is a very common denominator among all religions. Every religion will tell you that charity is very important. The Muslims also talk about charity. Christians talk about charity. So do the Hindus. In fact, Christians and the Muslims have what we call tithing. You're supposed to tithe about 10% of your income to the church or to your mosque. Whereas we Buddhists are more liberal. It's up to you to donate whatever that you want to or you can afford. So the purpose of today's talk is to instill a sense of consciousness that there is actually a spectrum of merits that the Buddha talked about, not just dana. Dana is actually a very low end sort of merit, and you go through various stages of merits. So it's like a rainbow spectrum of merits. This talk is based primarily on two suttas. One is called the Velama Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Nines, Sutta number 20. And the other sutta is from Majjhima Nikaya called the Dakkhina Vibhanga Sutta. And that is sutta number 142 in the Majjhima Nikaya. The English translation of that sutta, Dakkhina Vibhanga Sutta, is the exposition of offerings. Let me start off with Velama Sutta. Velama Sutta is about a Brahmin of the past called Velama. And this discourse was given to Anathapindika when he visited our Lord Buddha in his monastery that he donated to the Sangha called Jetavana near Savatthi. One day, Anathapindika visited the Buddha, and the Buddha asked him, "Well, householder, have you given dana to the families?" "Given, Bhante, but the dana was miserable. Only broken rice with a sour dish." So let me explain this first. Now, Anathapindika is called by this name because he gives food to those who have no protection. No protection in the sense that people who are poor, beggars and wanderers who live on the alms of other people. So actually he is an alms giver. And not only is he a very staunch supporter of the Sangha, but he also gives indiscriminately to whoever needs any food. So he opens a couple of stalls, dana stalls around, and anyone who is interested is welcome to go to his stall and collect the food. So this day when he came to visit the Buddha asked him whether he has really given the dana. And Anathapindika wasn't very happy because he said, "Yeah, I did give the dana, but my dana wasn't all that great. Only broken rice and a sour dish." You know what is broken rice? A 3B lah. Yung 3B 2 Nowadays you're also rich, huh? We are also fortunate. Most of you haven't seen even 3B. 3B is rice grains which are broken into small pieces. In the old days, during the war or when there's famine and you can't afford to buy whole grain rice, then you have to buy all these broken pieces. Only poor people will buy and cook and eat. And it's not very nice to eat that sort of rice. So he was making use of these broken pieces of rice to cook rice and to serve whoever needs the rice. And he only gave one dish, and that dish is called ginjaga in Pali. It's something sour, maybe like tauju, and it's something like vinegar. Something sour so that you can swallow the rice. Maybe not so nutritious, but at least something that can help you to eat, have appetite. So that's all he gave for that day. Just broken rice and a sour dish. And he wasn't very happy with his dana. So let me continue. Then the Buddha answers, "Whether miserable or delicious dana is given, if it is given in 5 ways, then wherever that dana karma ripens, the mind of the person who performed the dana will not be inclined to appreciate high-class food, clothes, vehicles, or pleasures of the 5 senses." And what are these 5 ways of giving? First, it says, if it is not given carefully, whether the dana is miserable or whether it's delicious, if it's not given carefully. Second factor, if it's given disrespectfully. Third factor, if it's not given personally. The fourth factor, if it's given rejectingly. And the fifth factor, if it's given with the view of not coming. I'll explain each of these 5 factors so that you can have a better understanding. The first factor, not carefully, is a translation of the Pali word asakachang. There are 2 commentaries to this word. I found this in this commentary to this particular sutta. It says that when one does not offer carefully or respectfully, but it seems to overlap with the second factor. So I looked into another commentary, which is a commentary to the Digha Nikaya, to another sutta that I will refer to afterwards. In that commentary, it says, Saddha virahitang asatta danam, which means that it is given without faith. Not carefully means given without faith. How can you give without faith? Maybe some of your close friends or business associate is a very staunch Buddhist and is going around canvassing for fundraising to build a temple or want to support some monks or something like that. And then he comes to approach you, and you are not a Buddhist, but because he is a business associate, if you don't give, then it might affect your business or it might affect your relationship. So you give not because of faith, but out of obligation, out of some strings, some ulterior motives that you have. So that sort of giving is not really very great. So this is one of the factors. The second one is disrespectfully. If you give disrespectfully, means you're not giving respect to the person who is worthy of your gift. Sometimes, like this morning, we went to the markets to beg for alms. This is what we usually do on every Sunday, to educate the people around Taiping on the proper way to give alms to monks, because we've heard of the so-called unvirtuous people who dress in robes and go around collecting ang paos and money from the public, thus causing disrepute to the Buddhist Sangha. When we go to the markets and people approach us to give ang pao, then our kapiyas will tell them that monks do not accept money. We only accept things that are allowable, like food and usable things. So this is one way of educating people. Despite our doing this for many months already, over a year or so, still this morning when we went to Taiping Market, a few people came to offer money to us. So it's a very long-term education program that we have to persist in doing. So sometimes when we go to collect alms, most of the time people are very respectful. They come and they put very nicely into the bowl. Sometimes they will even kneel down and bow and give. Some people bring the food and they just dump into the bowl. I don't know why they want to give in the first place if they don't have enough faith. Well, maybe this lady was not very happy because she mumbled something. Suddenly he saw us and then he complained to one of our kapiyas. How come you never told us earlier? So she was caught off guard, so she bought something and then she wasn't very happy, so she just dumped it into the bowl. Like Anatta Pindika, she wasn't happy with what she had to offer. She wanted to offer something else better maybe, but she was not given prior notice, so she was not given the opportunity to give according to her generosity. The commentary to the Digha Nikaya says that disrespectfully means not making your mind refined when you give. So when you give something, you must refine your mind and do it with real spirit of generosity and liberality, not out of obligation or because you are not happy because you have been told to do something that you don't like. The third is not personally, not doing it yourself. Some people, because they're very busy, but they have the faith, they have the generosity, they do want to give. But because they have other affairs to attend to, they cannot do it personally. Maybe they entrust their servants or members of the family to do it on their behalf. So even doing that sort of dana is not a very commendable sort of dana, because even though you give, next time when that karma ripens, you will not be inclined to enjoy the pleasures of the senses, to enjoy fine things like food and clothes and vehicles. There's one story about this in the Digha Nikaya, and this story is from Sutta number 23 in the Digha Nikaya called Payasi Sutta. Payasi is the name of a sultan, equivalent to our Malaysian sort of royalty. He's called a Rajanya, not a Raja. He's a Rajanya, which is like a sultan under King Pasenadi of the Kosalans. And at that time, this Payasi Rajanya, he held some wrong views. He believed that there is no hereafter, there is no afterworld. After you die, that's the end of it. He believed that there is no such thing as beings who can reappear spontaneously after death, who can be born spontaneously. He also did not believe that there's such a thing as good and evil karma, that if you do good or you do evil, and then there will be any karmic results. So this was the wrong view that he held. One fine day, a monk by the name of Venerable Kumarakassapa happened to be passing through his township, which is called Setabia. And he was staying north of Setabia town in the Singsapa forest. Then the ministers and close friends of this Rajanya, this Sultan, persuaded him to visit this monk in the hope that this monk could help to convince him to change his wrong views, because they knew of this monk who was a great orator and debater. So he went to visit Venerable Kumarakassapa and he told him his views. He says, Venerable, I don't believe in the hereafter. I don't believe that there are any beings who can be spontaneously born. I don't believe in karma and its results. Why do I say that? Because there are some of my friends and relatives, very close friends and relatives, who are very evil. They break the 5 precepts. They kill, they torture, they steal, they commit sexual misconduct, get drunk, and they lie. And then when they are afflicted by illness and they're lying at their deathbed, I would approach them and tell them, friend or kinsman, you have done such and such a thing, and these are supposed to be evil deeds. So when you die, you're supposed to go to hell. Now you are very close to me. After you've gone down to hell, can you please come back and tell me, so that I can be sure that there's a hell and that a person will suffer for his evil deeds? But then, Venerable, nobody came back to tell me, so there cannot be hell. And he did the same thing to his other friends or relatives who are virtuous people. Say, when you die, you've done such good things before. When you die and go to heaven, please come back and tell me. But they never came back to tell me, so there cannot be heaven or hell. So he held to that wrong view. Venerable Kumarakassapa argued with him and tried to persuade him in various ways using many similes. And finally, he was convinced and he changed his mind. He believed that there is karma and the results of karma. It's a long story. I'm not going to tell you the whole sutta. I'm going to tell you the ending part. Then, after he died, the Sultan Payasi was reborn in an empty celestial mansion. And that mansion was called Serisaka. Serisaka mansion is empty. It's just like a new house that you buy. And you buy a new house, there's nothing inside. No furniture, nothing. Just an empty celestial mansion. Now, at that time, there was a monk called Venerable Gavampati. Venerable Gavampati was a psychic monk. He used to spend his afternoon up in heaven because maybe it's too hot down on earth. So he goes up there to spend his afternoon to take his rest or to meditate. And he would go to this empty mansion because there's nobody there. He would go and take his rest and meditate. Now, how is it that he could go there without meeting with this ex-sultan? This is my conjecture. There is another story in the Vimana Vuttu, one of the books in the Khuddaka Nikaya, called Revati Vimana Vuttu. There's a story of a man called Nandiya. Nandiya was a very pious man, and he did a lot of good deeds while he was a human being. He ministered to the Sangha, gave food not only to the Sangha, gave charity also to those poor people, destitute people, people who are in need. Like nowadays, you do charity to the old folks' home, to the handicapped, to disaster victims. So he was very generous in that sense, giving not only to monks, not only to Sangha, but to all people who are in need. One day he also made a monastery and donated it to the Sangha. And when he went through the ceremony, or the water pouring ceremony of dedicating that monastery, that building to the Sangha, at that moment an empty mansion, complete with celestial maidens, appeared in heaven waiting for him. He hadn't died yet, he was still alive as a human being. Then one day, Venerable Moggallana, the left-hand disciple of the Buddha, who is famous for his psychic powers, he was taking a tour of heaven That was also his usual practice. He would go up to heaven, tour around the heavens, and ask the devas, what did you do in the past to deserve such pleasures and luxury? And then they will tell him what they did in the past, and then he would come down to earth and preach to people and encourage people to do good deeds. Sometimes he would go down to hell and make a tour of hell and interview the hell beings and ask them what they did. They will tell him all the bad things they did. So he come back to earth, and again he will preach and tell people. That's how he encouraged people to do good and to refrain from doing evil. So at that time, Venerable Moggallana was up there, and he went to this mansion, and he found that this mansion was a beautiful mansion, celestial mansion, full of celestial maidens. And the celestial maidens approached him, paid respect to him, and then told him, Bhante, when you go back to earth, please go and tell Nandiya to hurry up. We are getting bored waiting for him. He's not here yet. So Moggallana came down to earth, went to see the Buddha, and asked, Buddha, is it really possible for a celestial mansion complete with celestial maidens waiting up in heaven when a person has not died yet? And then the Buddha asked him, you saw it yourself, didn't you? So why are you asking me? So possibly this could have happened to Payasi Sultan as well. When he was doing good deeds, the empty mansion appeared there, but without the celestial maidens, just the empty mansion. And when Venerable Gahampati went there for his siesta or his afternoon meditation, Payasi, the Sultan, had not died yet. So one day when he was there, Sultan Payasi had already died and he was reborn there. He approached Venerable Gahampati, and Venerable Gahampati asked, who are you? What are you doing here? And then he said, he is Payasi, he was formerly a Sultan. And then immediately Venerable Gahampati remembered. He says, aren't you the Sultan who did not believe in karma, who did not believe in spontaneous rebirth, who did not believe in the afterworld? Then he said, yes, I was, but I was convinced otherwise by Venerable Kumara Kassapa. And then he said, what happened to your assistant, Uttara? Where is he now? And he says, Uttara is now in Tawatingsa, one plane higher than him. He's now in Jatu Maharajika, one of the 4 guardian kings' realms. Whereas Uttara, his servant or his worker, is one plane higher in Tawatingsa. And then he said, it's because, Bhante, when I did dana, I did not do it myself personally. I did not do it carefully. I entrusted this responsibility to Uttara. And Uttara, although he was doing the dana, using my funds and my belongings, he did it with full faith, personally, carefully, respectfully. And because of that, he's now born in Tawatingsa. I'm born one plane lower. So if you're very busy with worldly affairs and you can't personally do your dana, maybe your servant or your Indonesian mate, next time you might find out one plane higher than you. So if you want to do dana, try to do it yourself personally. The 4th factor is rejectingly. Rejectingly means giving things that are rejected, discarded. Like I said just now, these people who contribute to the tsunami victims, although some people are very genuine, give a lot of money in cash, others make use of the opportunity to get rid of things that they don't want. Not only to tsunami victims, also in temples and monasteries, you see a lot of second-hand furniture, second-hand things that people don't want. So they cart it to the monastery and give it to the monastery, to the temple. After all, they say monks are supposed to be easily contented. So this is also a sort of dana. Not to say that it's not dana, it's still dana. This brings us to another sutta called Aggacitta Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. It's in the book of Trees, Sutta number 57. At one time, Aggacitta, a wanderer, he approached the Blessed One and spoke to him thus. I have heard it said, Master Gautama, that the ascetic Gautama says, gifts should be given only to me and not to others. They should be given only to my disciples and not to the disciples of others. Only what is given to me brings great fruit, not what is given to others. Only what is given to my disciples brings great fruit, not what is given to the disciples of others. Now, Master Gautama, to those who say so, report Gautama's actual words and not misrepresent him? Do they declare this in accordance with your teachings? And will their assertion give to grounds for reproach? we certainly do not wish to misrepresent Master Gautama. So the Buddha says, those who say such a thing are actually misrepresenting me. I do not say that there will be merits only if you give to me or to my disciples. However, I do declare that even if a person were to throw away scraps after rinsing his bowl, after eating his lunch, scraps on his plate, if you rinse it and throw it into a pond, hoping that the animals or the fish, whatever in the water, can make use of the scraps, that too is dana. That too can give merits, can give good returns. However, I do declare that giving to a virtuous person who is free from greed, hatred and delusion will bring great fruit. And he gave a description of a person, actually of an arahant, who has overcome the 5 hindrances and who has got noma, loba, dosa and moha, who is really pure. So what the Buddha is implying is that there is a hierarchy of merits according to the virtues of the recipient. So even though you give away things that are discarded, second-hand furniture, second-hand clothes, whether you give to the temple or give to tsunami victims or victims in New Orleans, wherever, it's still dana. But be careful, because if you give away discarded things, next time you get back discarded things. And also, when you get your dana vipaka, your dana karma, when it ripens, you may not be inclined to enjoy high-class food, clothes, vehicles, and pleasures of the senses. The fifth factor is with a view of not coming. That is a literal translation. The Pali is anagamana ditthiko. With the view of not coming can be interpreted in this way, that you give so that the person won't come back again. Many years ago, when I was a very young monk, about 25 years ago, I just came back from Burma, from Thailand, and there in Burma and Thailand we used to go out for Pindabat every day. So I came back, went to Platicus and tried to go for Pindabat. I was staying in the Burmese temple at that time. At that time, it's not so easy to go for Pindabat because people are not used to that sort of tradition. So as I walked around Platicus and I stood in front of a house, and people would come out and give money, and I say I don't accept money. Then they go back and then they bring and give me canned food. Next day I come again, they see they close the door. If I come too often, they close the door or they ignore me. So sometimes they give you to get rid of you. It's also pantang to see a monk standing in front of the house. So if you give with that sort of intention in mind, that's also not a very good sort of giving, although it's still giving to get rid of someone. The commentaries, however, interpret this term, anagamana ditthika, as giving without believing in karma and its results. That means, as I said earlier, you may approach some of your friends, your business associates to help out in fundraising. They give not because they believe in karma and its results, but out of obligation or some ulterior motives. People give for various reasons. Some people also, they do what they call black dana. They earn money illegally and they cannot declare it in their income tax. And they cannot also make use of this to buy car or buy houses because the income tax people will come after them. So what they do is they take this money and donate to the temple. They use this money to do charity, so-called charity. These people may not believe in karma, or they may believe in karma. Right? But because the source of their dana is not pure, it will also not bring very good results. Okay, so to review, the Buddha was telling Anathapindika, whether miserable or delicious dana is given, if it is given not carefully, disrespectfully, not personally, rejectingly, or without believing in karma and its results, these 5 factors, then wherever the dana karma ripens, the mind of the person who performed the dana will not be inclined to appreciate high-class food, clothes, vehicles, pleasures of the 5 senses. And not only that, his or her children or spouse or slaves or servants or employees, they will not listen to that person, will not lend ear, will not arouse the mind to understand. And why is that so? because such is the result of dana that is not carefully performed. So when dana is not carefully performed, according to the reverse of those 5 factors, then you can expect these results. So if your family members don't listen to you, you can understand why. In the past, maybe you did dana and didn't do it carefully enough. There's also a story of a very rich man who died without a son in India during the Buddha's time, and all his fortune was confiscated by the king. This is found in the Samyutta Nikaya, I think. It's called the Dutiya Aputaka Sutta. There at that time, King Pasenadi of the Kosalans, he approached the Buddha in the daytime, and the Buddha saw him coming in the midday and asked him, "Great king, why are you coming at this time of the day?" And then the king told the Buddha, "It's fantastic, Bhante. I just came back from a very rich man's house, and I took over all his property, as it was the custom during that time, because he didn't have an heir. He had no son, no child, so whatever his property was belonged to the king. And when they went to take his property, they discovered that he had many pots of gold and silver buried under his hut. And then he said, "It's amazing, Bhante. This person, nobody would think that he's a millionaire, a rich man, because he goes around in ragged, very rough clothes, hempen clothes, and then he eats just broken rice and a sour dish every day. He goes around in a rickety old bullock hut, and nobody would think that he's so rich, but he's filthy rich. All these things are stored under his hut, but he does not make use of them. See, he's not inclined to make use of his fortune to enjoy the pleasures of the senses. He doesn't want to wear fine clothes, doesn't want to go around in a Rolls Royce or in a Mercedes, goes around in a bullock cart. He doesn't want to eat a 7-course dinner or lunch. He's just satisfied with broken rice and a sour dish." Then the Buddha told him the story. He says, "It is so. Why is that so? Because in the past, there was a Pacceka Buddha by the name of Tagara Sikhi. Now, that Pacceka Buddha is just like an ordinary monk. He's not like the Sammasambuddha, where he establishes a dispensation and has lots of disciples and he teaches the Dhamma. Pacceka Buddha is someone who is more reclusive. He stays by himself, according to what the scriptures tell us. So this Pacceka Buddha was going around for alms round one day, and this millionaire to be in the past life, he asked his wife to give him some alms. And then after that, he rose from his seat and went off. Then after that, he regretted having given alms to that monk. He says it would have been better if the alms that I gave him were given to my workers instead. It would be better if my workers had eaten the alms instead of giving to this monk. In that lifetime, he also murdered his brother's son on account of property. So he somehow or other got the property by killing his brother's son. So because of that, he did not have a son. Because he regretted after he had given, then his mind was not inclined to enjoy his fortune. So it seems that after he died, he was born in heaven for 7 lifetimes because of giving that dana to the Pacceka Buddha. Then after that, he was born as a millionaire for 7 lifetimes on earth. And all these 7 lifetimes, he was not inclined to make use of his fortune to enjoy himself. Although he was very rich, he was very miserly. He never wore fine clothes, never ate good food, never traveled in good vehicles. Then the Buddha says, now this millionaire has already exhausted his past merits, and he also has not acquired new merits. It is because of your past merits that you are born into fortunate circumstances. You are born as a rich man's son. You are born with intelligence, with good looks, and opportunities for doing well in life. But even being blessed with all such good opportunities, you become rich, you become famous, you become wealthy and prosperous, but you don't do new meritorious deeds. You don't do dana, you don't observe your sila, you don't listen to the Dhamma or learn more about what is the morality, you don't have moral values and so forth. Then you are actually eating up your old merits. You're not creating new ones. So this is exactly what happened to this millionaire. The Buddha said he had already exhausted his past merits. He has not created new ones. So after this last lifetime, he is now reborn in hell. If you don't give dana properly or regret such a thing could happen to you, you will not be inclined to enjoy the pleasures of the senses through the fortune that has rightly occurred to you because of your good karma. Then the Buddha talked about his past life. He says, once upon a time, there was a Brahmin called Velama, and he gave a very great dana. Maybe you need to take all these figures with a pinch of salt. He says he gave 84,000 gold plates of silver coins, 84,000 silver plates of gold coins, 84,000 bronze plates of jewels, 84,000 elephants decorated with gold ornaments, flags and so forth, 84,000 chariots decorated with lion hides, tiger hides, panther hides and expensive blankets, 84,000 decorated cows, 84,000 girls dressed up in full makeup, 84,000 seats spread with quality furs, rugs and carpets, 84,000 cloaks made of various fine materials. What more to speak of food, drinks and so forth. They were as abundant as the waters of a river. Now, householder, said the Buddha, you may think that someone else was that Brahmin Velama who gave the great dana, but you should not think so. I was at that time the Brahmin Velama. I gave that great dana, but there was no one who was worthy of that dana. No one purified that offering. So what the Buddha is saying is that there is a hierarchy of merits involved when you give. If the recipient is virtuous, then your dana will bear great fruit. If it's not so virtuous, it will bear fruit, but not very great fruit. So now he's going to give us the whole spectrum of merits, the hierarchy of karmic returns. He said, compared to Velama's Mahadana, it is more meritorious to give a meal to a Sotapanna. A Sotapanna is one who has attained the first stage of enlightenment. Even more meritorious than giving a meal to 100 Sotapannas is that given to a Sakadagami. A Sakadagami is one who has attained the second stage of enlightenment. And he went on, more meritorious than giving a meal to 100 Sakadagamis is that given to an Anagami. More meritorious than giving a meal to 100 Anagamis is that given to an Arahant. Even more meritorious than giving a meal to 100 Arahants is that given to a Pachika Buddha. Even more meritorious than giving a meal to 100 Pachika Buddhas is that given to a Sammasambuddha. Even more meritorious than giving a meal to one Sammasambuddha is that given to the Bhikkhu Sangha headed by the Sammasambuddha. And even more meritorious than giving a meal to the Bhikkhu Sangha headed by the Sammasambuddha is making a vihara, a monastery, a building for the Sangha from the four directions. So you can see that there is an ascending order of karmic returns as you give to people who are more virtuous. Virtuous in the sense of spiritual attainment. Now here it says, even more meritorious than giving a meal to the Bhikkhu Sangha headed by the Sammasambuddha is making a vihara for the Sangha from the four directions. What does that mean? It means that when you make a building, a kuti or a hall like this, and you present it to the Sangha, you're not thinking of a particular monk or a particular group of monks. You're thinking of the Sangha from the four directions. Which means that any member of the Sangha who comes to that building has a right to use it according to monastic rules and regulations. So there's no discrimination. Only if you can have that state of mind when you are doing the dana will you qualify for that sort of merits. Because most of us have some sort of attachment to a personality. When we give something, you want to give to a certain Bhante because you know him already, and you automatically or unconsciously, your mind is inclined towards dedicating your gift to that particular monk. When there's a dana, some ladies will come and say, Bhante, I purposely cook this for you, you must eat, Just imagine the 100 people saying the same thing. How are you going to finish eating that? Unless you are able to program your mind in such a way that you are not discriminative. Don't discriminate and say that I give this only to this particular group of monks. But you offer this to the Sangha from the four directions. Anywhere in the world, when they come, they have a right to use it according to monastic regulations. Only then will it qualify for very high merits. Then, even more meritorious than making a vihara for the Sangha from the four directions is taking refuge in the triple gem. You see how much it costs to make a vihara a big building or a kuti for the Sangha from the four directions, it costs much more than just saying Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, right? But just reciting Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami does not necessarily qualify you to get these merits. When you do that, you must do that with understanding and with conviction. When you take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, you don't just recite it like a parrot, but you must do it with conviction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, what does that mean? Who is the Buddha? Taking refuge in the Dhamma, what does that mean? What is the Dhamma? How do I take refuge? Taking refuge in the Sangha, what does that mean? You must be able to understand what the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are in very profound way. And you must also be able to understand your level of commitment when you take refuge in that. Well, the commentaries say that this refers to the faith, the unshakable faith in a Sotapanna, a person who has realized the Dhamma. When a person has realized the Dhamma, then he would, of course, appreciate the Buddha, because he knew that the Buddha was the one who discovered this way, taught us this way. He's the teacher. And then he has already practiced the Dhamma until he realizes it. Therefore, he also understands what the Dhamma is. And he also knows what the Sangha is, because you could say in a way that he is also part of the Sangha because he has realized the Dhamma. So the unshakable faith of someone who has realized the Dhamma is referred to when you say that taking refuge in the Triple Gem can give you greater merits than making a vihara for the Sangha from the four directions. Even more meritorious than taking refuge in the Triple Gem is observing the five precepts. Observing the five precepts is even more meritorious than just saying Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Why? Because it takes effort to observe the precepts. Every time you encounter a situation that entails breaking the five precepts, you have to watch yourself, you have to restrain yourself, you have to make sure that you don't break it. And you have to overcome a lot of temptations, particularly if you're a businessman, and businessmen always complain it's not easy to observe the five precepts. Not only that, in their daily dealings with their clients, as well as with the government now when it comes to income tax, right? So it's more meritorious than just taking refuge in the Triple Gem. And even more meritorious than observing the five precepts is developing metta for just a few moments. Gandohana Mata. Gandohana Mata can be interpreted in two ways. One is that just as long as it takes you to sniff some perfume or scent that you hold in your fingertips, just for as long as that, if you are able to practice metta, loving kindness, that itself is greater in merits than observing the five precepts. And even greater than that is being able to perceive the impermanence of phenomena for just a snap of your fingers. That means practicing vipassana meditation. When you practice vipassana meditation and you are able to see the arising and passing away of phenomena of the five aggregates, having this perception of impermanence, then that merits is even greater than practicing metta. So now we have all this whole spectrum of merits. The lower end, of course, is dana, right? That's the lowest end merit, doing dana to whoever. And then the highest one is practicing vipassana meditation and perceiving the impermanence of phenomena. In the Dakkhina Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha talked about giving again to individuals, personal offerings. In this Velama Sutta, the Buddha starts with the Sotapan. He says, even more meritorious than giving all these fantastic great dana that Velama the Brahmin has given is giving a meal to a Sotapan. He started with that. But in the Dakkhina Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha said that if a person were to give dana to an animal, to a stray dog, for example, then the karmic result is 100-fold. Not necessarily 100 plates of rice. 100-fold in terms of ayu wano sukham palang, of long life, beauty, happiness or comfort, and strength and intelligence. If you give to an immoral, ordinary person, that means a person who does not have five precepts, who does not observe the five precepts, then is 1,000-fold. So if you give the bogus monk also, get 1,000-fold. Then if you give to a virtuous, ordinary person, a person who has not attained anything, maybe he observes the five precepts, you give it to him, it's 100,000-fold in return. If you give to someone who has attained the jhanas, who has attained some meditative absorptions, practicing meditation, it is 10 billion-fold. If you give to a disciple of the Buddha who is on the path to become a Sotapan, walking the Eightfold Noble Path to become a Sotapan, then the karmic returns immeasurable, cannot measure. And so on for all the others. Even if you give to a Sotapanna or someone who is on the Sagadagami path, or to a Sagadagami, someone who is on an Anagami path, and an Anagami, to someone who is on the Arahata path, and to an Arahant, and after that to a Pachiba Buddha or to a Sammasambuddha. All these immeasurable, incalculable. He talks about personal offerings. Then he also talks about Sangika offerings, offering to the Sangha. All of them are also incalculable, but still there's a hierarchy. If you give a dana to the Sangha, to the Bhikkhuni representatives from the Bhikkhuni Sangha, it starts from there, it's a lower end one. Or you give to Bhikkhu representatives from the Bhikkhu Sangha, it's higher. Or you give to both Bhikkhu and Bhikkhuni representatives from both the Bhikkhu and the Bhikkhuni Sangha. Or you give to the whole Bhikkhuni Sangha without discrimination. You don't ask them to select representative. You give to the whole Bhikkhuni Sangha. Then the next one is giving to the Bhikkhu Sangha, it's higher. Or you give to both the Bhikkhu and the Bhikkhuni Sangha together, that's even higher. And then the highest, of course, is giving to the Bhikkhu and the Bhikkhuni Sangha headed by the Sammasambuddha. So this is talking about Sangika Dana, which I mentioned about just now. It means you are actually not thinking of any particular individuals, but you are giving to the Sangha as a whole. Now the Buddha ended that particular sutta with, in future Ananda, there will be members of the clan, or we could call them nominal or bogus monks, who are yellow necks. Yellow necks in the sense that they have a piece of yellow cloth tied around their necks or arms, representing the Sangha. But they are immoral, they are of evil character, they pretend to be monks, they are not celibates, they have wives and children, and they are engaged in worldly occupations. Now in future Ananda, if people give gifts to such immoral persons for the sake of the Sangha, even when they give these gifts to such an immoral person who just wears a band of yellow cloth around his neck or arm, thinking of the Sangha, not thinking of that particular individual, that he's just a representative of the Sangha. Even then I say, an offering made to the Sangha is incalculable, immeasurable. And I say that in no way does a gift to a person individually ever have greater fruit than an offering made to the Sangha. It's found in the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 142, where the Buddha says that if we make a gift to the Sangha without discriminating that particular representative of the Sangha, then it's still very great. Now all these talk about karmic returns seems to be very calculative and not really very good for our Chinese mentality, because we are already like that. We Chinese are very calculative. That's why people sometimes say that we Chinese or Buddhists in Malaysia are very greedy merit makers. We always want to make merits, but we don't care about the immediate consequences. What do I mean? It's just like Katina Day. Everybody wants to donate robes to the monks. There may be only 4 monks in a monastery, but there may be 400 people, each of them wanting to donate one set of robes. So are the monks going to use that or not? They don't care, no, whether the monks use or not. I want my merits. I want to make my investment. That's all that matters. Whether the monks need or not is not my business. Right? Of course, we have been trying to educate people to tell them we should use our intelligence and wisdom when we give. After all, the law of karma works in this way. You reap what you sow. If you give something that you don't need, when the law of karma comes back, you get back what you don't need. Like us, maybe in the past life we gave a lot of robes, and now we get a lot of robes, and so we have to have a storeroom, make sure that the storeroom is rat proof, is termite proof, and it's cockroach proof. And then we have to get rid of all these excess things. That's why in our Katina, we don't encourage people to bring robes to us. We have a common Katina fund, everybody donates to it, and then from that Katina fund, we just procure the number of sets of robes that are required for the number of Sangha that are present. If there are only 10 members, we only get 10 sets of robes, 10 sets of requisites, and give to the 10 members of the Sangha. Then the rest of the fund is used to maintain and run the monastery for the rest of the year, and for building projects and so forth. So we have been trying to educate people, but it's not easy. I want my celestial clothes waiting for me out in heaven. Now, also because of this sort of mentality that is found in the Theravada scriptures, like in Vedama Sutta, the Buddha talked about all this hierarchy of karmic returns. In Dakina Vibhanga Sutta, the Buddha also even went into more detail. It has led in the past some sort of reaction to it. That's why now, with time, they come up with the concept of parami. Because the parami is actually now found in the early Tipitaka, in the early scriptures of the Pali Canon. You cannot find the word parami. The term parami came later, the concept of parami. And when they talk about parami, they say that if you do dana because you want something else in return, you are thinking of the karmic returns. That is not parami. Parami is something you do without thinking of getting material returns. You do something for the sake of doing it. Let's say, for example, in dana, you give not because you want something back in return in this life or in the future life, but because somebody needs it, and he needs the right thing at the right time. You give something that is beneficial to someone who needs it at the right time. Then, without thinking of wanting anything else in return, that is parami. And for the other paramis as well. Or you do the dana with that motive as well as with the motive of gaining liberation. Gaining liberation means being free of, being liberated from greed, hatred, and delusion. Being liberated from the wrong view that there is a self, become selfless, go beyond the self, become not selfish. So if you have that sort of dual motive without wanting anything else in return, and as a factor or condition for you to be liberated from your defilements, only then can that be qualified as parami. So if you are very calculative and you will say, oh, I want to give this, instead of giving to the tsunami victims, instead of giving it to the victims in Pakistan, earthquake, or to those in US, I want to reserve this to give only to the Sangha because it will give the greatest fruits. That is not parami. That is dana. Dana, but it will give great fruits. But when it gives great fruits, your mind may not be inclined to seek liberation. So you may become filthy rich, but you will not be inclined to study the Dhamma or to practice meditation to get out of samsara. You will be rich. You have all these things that you wish for, but you will still be going around in samsara and not out of it. So if you really want to do merits, then you must think in terms of this spectrum of merits. Dana is important, of course, because even as monks, it's because we have done dana in the past, that's why we are well supported. Maybe too much dana, that's why we got too many things. But then again, when you're well supported, then these will create conducive conditions for you to practice spirituality, to develop your meditation. So I hope that you all will not be contented just with doing dana, with doing service, but you will try to study the Dhamma, put it into practice, particularly to practice loving kindness, meditation, not only in thought, but also in words and deed. You should have metta for people who are suffering, to relieve people of suffering, as well as to practice vipassana meditation. So I hope that you all will be able to go through the whole spectrum of merits and eventually be liberated from samsara, be liberated from your defilements so that you can be in a better position to help others.